Hello, and welcome to the Noah Baumbach series. This is the second time that we've done a director-focused series, and so we're going to go through the entire filmography of Noah Baumbach. You might know Noah Baumbach, you might not, but you might know some of his movies. He's done Marriage Story, Academy Award-nominated Marriage Story. He's done The Squid and the Whale. You might have seen Kicking and Screaming if you strolled around on Netflix. You might have seen the Meyerowitz Stories. You might have seen the movie that we're talking about today, which is, of course, Frances Ha. One of his best movies. This movie came out in 2013. It's a lovely black and white movie starring Greta Gerwig, one of my favorite performances of all time. And it's a movie about a person just living their life. It's just a young woman who is a dancer in New York City, basically just trying to get an apartment, trying to make rent. Very simple goals, and it's a really lovely, movie. It's a joyful movie that makes you really feel warm despite its like bitter loneliness at its core, but it celebrates that loneliness, and it ends up being a really joyful movie. So let's just jump right into it. Before we start talking about Frances Ha, I'm curious what your level of knowledge of Noah Baumbach was coming into this. Jack, you don't watch a ton of movies. Had you ever seen a Noah Baumbach movie before?
No.
Hell yeah. Tyler?
I'm not like super well versed in Baumbach, but I love Marriage Story, and I really enjoy this movie as well. I think Frances Ha is really good, and I feel like Baumbach is someone who, how do I want to put this?
Well,
I think he does yeah, thanks. I think he does simple stories really well, and I think this is a movie that is sneakily very hard to make.
Yeah.
You can look at this and like think it's like very simple and like you could write a movie like this. You probably can't.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Baumbach does really well. And we'll talk about this throughout his filmography, but I think he does humans really well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally.
And that's something I'm always impressed with by his things. And like, we'll also discuss, like, I wish he would have more diverse casts and stuff, but like, overall, I think he does. I mean, is the term like mumblecore kind of? I know that's it. Yeah, it's kind of a bad term, but like it is. This is Baumbach is mumblecore in most ways, and like mumblecore is basically a phenomenon where like a lot of like movies just came out where like people are just like in their 20s and they're like mumbling through like all their dialogue and stuff, and that's kind of like the kind of like sheen slash like reason you're watching it is because like you're watching real people and like real people mumble and stuff, and I think Baumbach just does human beings really well. And I do like Baumbach a lot.
Yeah, and I think just to continue on that train of thought before we start talking about the movie, the reason that we picked Baumbach was because I have already seen all of Noah Baumbach's movies. I did a Baumbachathon back in the summer of 2020, and I just fell in love with all of his movies, and he's one of my favorite filmmakers, as is Bong for all of us. And you're right, he does humans really well. He is one of my favorite writers of dialogue because it feels so natural and authentic, and it seems improvisatory, but it's not. It's very strictly kept to the script. There is a simplicity in the filmmaking, and there's a simplicity in like the goals of the characters that I just really appreciate. And it's very, on the page, it shouldn't work, right? Because like it's so much of it is characters saying like kind of exactly how they feel, being like very, very, again, as I keep talking about, very sincere. And that usually doesn't work, but he somehow pulls it off. You think about Marriage Story, there's a scene where, and we'll get to Marriage Story eventually, but like there's a scene where two characters are just really having it out with each other in an apartment, and they're just saying everything that they wanted to say forever. And that's not how real life works. But in that moment, you totally buy it, and it's so real. So with that being said, we really wanted to talk about Noah Baumbach, and we wanted to start with a movie that might be more familiar. I do think that this is one of his best movies. Jack, let's start with you. Just give me your overall impressions of Frances Ha watching it for the first time.
I gotta say, if I'm being honest, I was a little lukewarm on it.
Yeah,
totally. It wasn't bad. It wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen. Wasn't the best movie I've ever seen. It felt like a little meandering at times to me. And I don't know. It just didn't do a whole lot for me. Like I thought the characters were all good. The performances I thought were mostly good, but it just Didn't love it. It was a movie to me.
For sure. Tyler, what about you?
Again, I watched this film a while ago, and I like skimmed through it. I've been very busy lately.
You're a busy baby.
Let him know.
But I do really like this movie. I think the more I watch it in my 20s, the more I'm really going to like it, because it is about a 27-year-old artist, and I think right now in my life, I really relate to that. Not that I'm 27, but I'm getting there.
Old ass man.
But like, I feel like the meandering quality, I do feel like meandering is a good way to put this film. But the thing is, I think in your 20s as an artist, that's kind of how your life is.
Totally.
And I really like how Frances is portrayed in this film. Like, she's like, Greta Gerwig gives a fantastic performance, and we'll definitely talk about it, but she's like very likable. You can like relate to her, and I just really like how her whole motivation is like really just finding like a new place to live. Like, it's sweet. And like at the very end, when she like puts her like nameplate in it and she cuts it off to Frances Ha, like that's really, I just like clever stuff like that like Baumbach puts in his films, that like, you know, you have like a nice setup at the beginning where you're like, why is this called that? And then at the very end, it's like, here's why it's called that. It's like a very sweet, like, and again, beginning, middle, and end, that is a story. But I feel like often we forget about that. And when we can see like a clear beginning, middle, end, it's like nice in a film. And I think Baumbach does that really well in all his films, but in this one in particular. Always love Adam Driver too. But he's really good in this. And so is Michael Zegan. It's just like it's a simple film that I appreciate the more I watch, I think. I also really like that sequence where she just like goes home, I think. Like I forgot where she lived because it's been a couple years.
Yeah.
Sacramento, right. Yeah. Fucking Ladybird. But yeah, she goes back to Sacramento, and it's just like a montage of it. And that also is just like, so I just like that sequence because it's like, when you're living your life in New York or wherever you are, LA, whatever, like that's always interesting and that's fun. But then when you go home, it literally feels like a montage. Like I'm glad they didn't like think about it or I'm glad they didn't like spend too much time there. I'm glad it was just like a nice little montage, and I was like, oh, okay, now she's just like back. That was like fast and sweet. But there's a lot of moments in this film that I really like, and overall, I can't say I really like to love probably love Frances Ha as a film.
Well, I got three things to respond to right there. Number one, I come prepared with fun facts for the Noah Baumbach series. Okay, I didn't have fun facts for Bong because,
and that's why you're hosting. Yeah,
that's why I'm hosting.
We love fun facts.
Okay, so number one,
I'll host the Pete Davidson series that we do.
That would be great.
Oh, I can't wait to get to Suicide Squad.
Yeah. Little fun fact number one. That sequence in Sacramento was originally 40 pages long, and they cut it down.
God damn.
And they made it into just a montage, like you said, which I think is such a smart choice on Baumbach and Gerwig's part.
Great decision. Holy
crap.
Because the movie, one of the great things about this movie is its length. It's an hour and 26 minutes. It's a tight hour and 26 minutes.
I did love that. I did appreciate that. I love me a good short get out movie.
Totally. And with those extra 40 pages, this movie comes out to like 2 hours, maybe over 2 hours, depending on, you know, how long that sequence it goes. I think that was a smart choice to cut that down because, like you said, it does really reflect the idea of like going back home, just giving you pieces of everything. And also, fun fact number two, those are actually Greta Gerwig's parents in the movie.
Right. I did know that, yeah.
Which is, of course, as Peter Bogdanovich in an interview with Noah Baumbach said, a John Cassavetes tradition. John Cassavetes is a filmmaker that Noah Baumbach is really indebted to, does a lot of movies that I wouldn't say are necessarily similar, but you could definitely feel sort of a kinship between the filmography of Cassavetes and Baumbach, as you can also feel with the French New Wave. That's what Frances Ha is. Like, Frances Ha is meandering, like you said, Jack. And that is the same sort of vibe that the French New Wave gives off. When you watch The 400 Blows, it's just a kid walking around France, you know? Like, that's the movie. When you watch Cleo from 5 to 7, it's a woman walking around in France.
For 2 hours.
Yeah, and it's lovely. It's just
From
a slice
5 to
of life.
7.
Let's go ahead and just start with Greta Gerwig, because this is like the Greta Gerwig show. And
Yes.
I already mentioned it. It's one of my favorite performances of all time, because I just don't think I've ever seen a performance quite like this. Greta Gerwig described Frances as sort of like a clown, which I think when you watch it through that prism, it's really funny. Well, I mean, it's already really funny, but it's extra funny because she has these big movements. Like she'll throw her arms out and then immediately recoil because she's unsure of like the choice that she's just made. And in that way, and in the way that she's taller than everyone else and sort of slouches, but has this athletic dance ability, but is very sort of uncoordinated in that, all of the physical aspects of the performance create what is like my favorite physical performance. You know, when you think of a physical performance, you think of like De Niro in Raging Bull or something like that. But this is equally as physical. It's just in a completely different way. She's dancing through the streets of New York and she's slouching and she's like doing these weird clownish movements. All of it just accumulates into what is one of my favorite characters in film and television of all time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with that, Dan. Greta Gerwig's like fantastic in this. And I think I watched this after I watched Lady Bird, and it makes me really wish Greta Gerwig could have made Lady Bird with her in the lead. Because Saoirse Ronan's great, and I feel like eventually we'll talk about Lady Bird at some point on this pod. I really like that movie. But there's a certain naturalness that comes with Greta Gerwig's performance in this film that is just like riveting. And I think that comes from her. Like, she is a performer mostly, but now she's like kind of like pivoted into writing and directing. And I feel like you can tell who like a writer director is when they're performing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
there's
totally.
just like a lot of interesting choices that she does that like clearly isn't through like acting school. You know, it's just like,
yeah.
I think about that scene where she's talking with those, I think they're like older people and they're like having wine and stuff and they keep like looking at her funny. And it's a super endearing scene because I feel like we've all been there. We've all been in a place like where we feel like every word we say is just horrible. And I feel like Frances feels that throughout the entire movie. It's just like she's rethinking every word she's saying. And I think she makes the film. Like she's really great, and it's a wonderful performance, and like it's an important performance because if you don't like Frances, you're not going to like the movie.
Yeah.
And I think Greta Gerwig does a really good job of being endearing in this film. And I'm really happy. I think this is one of her first like leading roles. And I'm just really happy she got to do that, you know?
Yeah, you know, I feel like we've seen, you know, thousands of characters who are kind of like in that base mold of like the, you know, quirky white lady and stuff. But I feel like she was able to do it in like a new and unique way and just overall delivered like a really strong performance that I enjoyed. It was one of my favorite parts of the movie. I love that scene where she's just like dancing through the streets on her way home or to
Beautiful.
wherever she was going. But no, she gave a solid performance throughout this.
And it should be noted that this is the second time that Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig worked together. They worked together first on Greenberg, which was the movie he did before this, Ben Stiller movie. And I'm so glad that they ended up partnering up on this and co-writing it. And so much of this movie is Greta Gerwig's, not only because of the performance, not only because of the writing, but just the spirit of it. You know, you feel a lot of Lady Bird in this movie, and you feel a lot of Frances Ha in Lady Bird. And they very much can be watched together. You could watch them back to back. You could do a double feature. Okay, we'll continue to talk about Greta Gerwig, obviously, because she's the lead of the movie and the co-writer. But let's shift the focus a little bit to all of the other stuff that I think makes this movie really interesting. Does the black and white work for you? It's very much influenced by French New Wave, and it's very much feels like French New Wave. I would never say that it is derivative of it or it's trying too hard to call to make us aware of that. I think it very naturally works in black and white in a way that I think is not just a comment on something, but is in service of something, if that makes sense.
I think black and white is a very difficult thing because again, a lot of people think you just like put a filter on and that's like black and white. Not the case. I mean, Mank is a perfect example of a film that was meant to be in black and white. But yeah, this is definitely, again, we've mentioned French New Wave a lot. French New Wave is a very film studies term, but I definitely think it fits here. I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, like why is it in black and white? But the more you watch it, the more you realize, like, no, this feels like a movie. Like, it'd just be a different movie if it was in color. I think the black and white works very well with the nature of the film. And I think Baumbach said in an interview or something about it being in black and white, he was just like, it felt like it needed to be. So that's what I did with it. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. And I think we haven't super talked about the shot composition in it, but it's done really well. And I think the black and white like really adds to like the small apartments that he's filming in, and also just some of like the dinner sequences that are again shot beautifully. And I think the black and white really works for Francis Ha. It's funny though because the poster is like pink.
Yeah, that's true. Jack, how about you? Do you? I mean, you don't watch a ton of movies, so I'm curious because when I first started watching movies, I was very much like unattracted to black and white. I was sort of like we'll just put it in color if you can. Like, does the black and white work on you?
I mean, I thought like stylistically, like it seemed to fit just kind of with the overall like tone and pacing and the shots of the movie, but like I wasn't like, oh, I wish this was in color. Yeah. But I wasn't all like, oh, this is so cool that this is in black and white. It was like, I understand the decision. It didn't do a whole lot for me, but like it wasn't like a deterrent for me. Yeah. It was nice to watch something different. It felt different than all the other films I've seen recently.
Yeah, and I think Baumbach wanted to go into this movie with a stripped down crew and trying to do something a little bit more simple because he had made a few like very, very strange comedies leading up to that. He did Margot at the Wedding with Nicole Kidman, and then he did Greenberg with Ben Stiller. And so he wanted to kind of just strip it down and move back into that sort of New York setting that he grew up in and is so familiar with. Tyler, you were talking about shot composition. This movie, again, I think you hit it right on the head early on when you said like this movie is so much harder to make than you might think, because it doesn't seem like a stylish quote unquote movie, but there are constantly decisions being made by Noah Baumbach and the rest of the team that are so imbued with style, but in a way that like it's not too showy. It's not trying. It's, you know, I love Birdman. We all love Birdman here. Okay. But it's very much a showy. I've never seen
Birdman.
Birdman is a very showy movie. It's very aware of the fact that it's doing a camera trick the entire time, you know? Yeah. This one though, the shot composition is sneaky stylish. There's only small moments that you really notice you're even watching a movie. Because for the most part, it does feel, again, authentic to life. It's very much unencumbered by the fact that it is a film, if that makes sense. Yeah,
it does.
But there's like small moments. I love the shakiness of them shooting out of the back of a pickup truck when Francis is dancing through the street. That scene is just so lively and full of joy. And it throughout the movie, I think there's a lot of moments like that imbue style, but don't call attention to itself.
100%. I think you nailed it there, Dan. And I also think you can just really tell everyone enjoyed making this movie. I know also like Baumbach and like Gerwig probably started seeing each other at the inception of this film. But again, it's a very like genuine story, and the shot composition like also just shows that. And I'm really glad. I actually didn't know that fact about there was a 40-page sequence in Sacramento.
That's insane.
And it's really cool that they cut that.
Because that's Lady Bird.
Down to a montage. No, exactly. That is literally.
I said to my mom when we were watching this, I'm like, this feels like what happens after Lady Bird.
Yeah.
No, yeah. It's very accurate. This is, it is a spiritual sequel to Lady Bird, even though it came out like 5 years before Lady Bird. And again, I think I said it earlier in the podcast, I really wish Greta Gerwig was young enough to play Lady Bird. Yeah. When it was coming out, because her performance in this is like super endearing. And I love Saoirse Ronan, but like Greta Gerwig like really sells it here. Yeah.
Now, just one more thing about like the sort of filmmaking that I want to talk about is the music, because it's a lot of bold choices being made with the music. Again, very French New Wave heavy with some of the music. A lot of the music is like very, very big. The ones that always stands out to me is, well, first of all, one of my favorite moments in the movie is when she gets the tax rebate and she just goes like, ah, yeah. And she jumps out, runs out into the street, and the music starts playing. It's like very big and very fun. And then she goes on her date. But the other one is when she's waiting outside of Sophie's office and she goes, ahoy, sexy. And then they go out and they have lunch. And when they're having this like lunch date, it's like this big swelling orchestral old music that's so romantic, and it feels like a big like romance, and in a completely platonic way that really is the relationship that they have. It's this great big romance, but without, you know, the sexual feelings, you know, towards each other. Just purely platonic. Using that kind of music, infusing some like 80s pop songs, you know, like David Bowie is in there. And so I just think that the music in this movie, it adds to the overall joyous feeling of the movie. Because if you put sad music over Frances Ha, it's a completely different movie. And that goes for most movies, but I think this one particularly though, because like I said, at its core, it's bitterly lonely. Like Frances Ha is trying to make it as an artist in New York City. And we've seen that movie a million times. If you put sad music on it, it feels like one of those movies. If you put this kind of music on top of it, it's this romantic, hopeful kind of movie.
Well, I think it also just characterizes Frances really well.
Yes.
Because it's not that she's just like a depressed artist like we always see. It's like she's a depressed artist, but also she like is a little goofy person. Which as a little goofy person, I can relate to.
And she is struggling to make it, but she's just like small victories, right? And that's what really keeps her going.
I feel like she's gonna be okay in the end.
Yeah, totally.
Like no matter what's going on right now, like she'll figure it out.
Because at the end of the day, she can still like go back to Sacramento sometimes or go to Europe, like, you know, just on a jog, you know. It's not like the system has taken Frances over, you know.
Right.
It's not like she has to work a 40-hour a week work job or anything.
Totally, yeah. Which actually, I do want to come back to that, but first, you just hit on something that's so awesome. You were saying that the music is like so Frances, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. Sometimes you don't know where the music is coming from in a movie. I'm not just talking like diegetic versus non-diegetic music, but like who is inspiring this soundtrack? Like, is this the soundtrack that plays in the main character's head? Is this an omniscient sort of soundtrack?
Right.
Like, is this the tone that the director is trying to set? Like, who is the music for and by? And in this movie, it's like songs that Frances is listening to. Like, she's listening to Modern Love by David Bowie on her iPod, like for sure. And then it's also this like big romantic French New Wave sort of stuff. Like, it all feels of a piece with Frances, the character. It never feels like Noah inserting a song into the movie.
Yeah, the songs are, and we'll talk about this with more of Baumbach's films because he does some really interesting stuff with music and Marriage Story.
Yeah.
Particularly with Being Alive and when ScarJo's also singing, and those scenes are like back to back. I love Marriage Story. It's never overpowering and the music never feels out of place. And that's, again, what we've been talking about this whole podcast. Baumbach makes films that are very difficult to make, but like, from an outside perspective, it's very hard to see how hard it is to make.
He's a good magician.
And it's the same with the music. He's a good magician, yeah.
And you were just hitting on this as well. Like, Frances does have the ability to go back to Sacramento. I think one thing that I love so much about this movie is the Adam Driver character and the Michael Zegan character. I love those two. And I want to talk about those two a little bit because they have... One, it's Adam Driver. It's the first time Baumbach and Adam Driver work together, and it becomes a collaboration, much like Bong and Song. It becomes a collaboration that will last forever, and I love so much.
Yeah, and just wait till White Noise. It's with Greta Gerwig and Adam Driver. So
it's gonna be sick. But with those two characters, like the movie comments on, and characters comment on in the movie, like how much of a rich kid apartment this is, and like they are sort of playing poverty, but they really aren't poor. Like Benji says, like he finally caved and takes a step loan from his dad, the bastard. And then Adam Driver's father is apparently super wealthy as well, because Sophie has that one line, don't you know who Lev Shapiro's father is? So like they have the appearance of like this like broke New York artist life, but they really are living in like what is probably $1 million apartment, like full of like this very expensive stuff. And I think the movie is very keenly aware of that. Talk about Benji and Lev, Adam Driver and Michael Zegan, because I think they're so awesome in this movie.
Dude, I fucking met Benji before.
Really?
I can't name exactly who. No. Like I've met that person before. I feel like not like I've actually met him in real life, but I feel like I've met that person who's like, I'm working on my Gremlins 3 script here. I'm working on my SNL scripts that someone said I could get a job at. I just feel like I've met people like that before, so that was funny for me to see.
Yeah, I love that. I love when, because he also is like, yeah, I think I could get a job at SNL, and then a couple scenes later, she's like, well, what about SNL? And he's like, yeah, the show's going downhill anyway.
Gone down so
and he's always just lying.
So
he's just constantly lying about things.
right.
Yeah, no, they're like very like relatable, and they're both like very fucking good in this movie. Again, I haven't seen it in a couple years, and I didn't have time to watch it this week, but like from what I can remember, it's just like they're a lot of fun, and they just kind of like add to the world. I will just touch on the thing you talked about briefly, Dan, with just like, I feel like this is something we'll have to touch on because we are talking about Noah Baumbach. Most of his films do discuss middle to upper class people that always have like upward mobility, like regardless. And it's like, we just did a series with Bong Joon-ho. Our last Bong Joon-ho movie was literally about like classism, like the rich and the poor.
Totally.
Like a lot of his films are about like people in the service industry who are like visited by like a fucking like creature, like from the like in the host. Like there's a lot of like interesting things that are other filmmakers' duties. And I feel like with Noah Baumbach, his purpose in a weird way is to talk about this like middle to upper class person that feels depressed and is like feels like very sad, and like even though they do have the means to be okay regardless, like they're still sad. And it's a weird thing because I feel like it's just a weird thing to like touch on. But like Baumbach just always does that. And I don't think that like, I feel like people always like write Baumbach off because they're like, oh, well, he's only talking about like upper class, like white America. And it's like, that is true. But also like we do need that in some ways, because I feel like everyone in some ways need to be seen. And I think Baumbach, that's his unique twist on things, is that's what he discusses in a lot of it. And I think that is in Francis Ha as well. Like a lot of the times you're just like, well, dude, you like literally just went to Europe. Like you can't do that. Like not a lot of people can just do that, Francis. But I think it works. And I think it's a very unique thing that he tackles. I don't know. I just wanted to like touch on that because I feel like, well, I don't want to like have to be backpedaling about like Baumbach the entire time, because we just watched the most perfect movie about like classism.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like now we're kind of not exactly, but now we're kind of like going into a director that's a 1%.
Will be as good as that one.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Let's tackle this real quick because not real quick, but let's tackle it because I think it is a very fair point. Noah Baumbach's movies are not very colorful, like whatsoever. That's definitely a very fair criticism of the movies, and they are upper middle class, predominantly white. And in a lot of ways, you know, when I first watched Marriage Story too, I was just like, this is such a great movie. It is like, it very much is Kramer versus Kramer. If you've ever seen Kramer versus Kramer, it's basically that movie, except taking it even one level further into the realm of like unrelatability, because it's about an actor and a director now, like in New York and Hollywood. But those are still like real stories, and they're still like very interesting. And especially for me, because I'm just interested in those kinds of fields. I think one thing that you can say is a guy like Christopher Nolan, one of my favorite filmmakers, one of my heroes. His movies are really white, except for Tenet. But even Tenet is really white, except for John David Washington.
Except for Tacho, yeah.
So his movies are really white, and there's no reason that they have to be. Christopher Nolan makes blockbuster movies. He makes movies that are like action hits. So it doesn't matter what the color of the skin is of the character. So like it literally could be anybody. So there's really no excuse for his movies to be as white as they are. Noah Baumbach doesn't make big blockbuster action movies. He makes movies that are about his life so much. And so when he writes about upper middle class white people, particularly about his relationship with his upper middle class white father and divorce and stuff like that, it is coming from him. And so that's a reflection of his reality. And his reality is upper middle class and white. And so it's authentic to who he is as an artist. So I don't want to be like overly critical of it, but it is something to be aware of, that those movies are basically colorless.
Yeah, of course. And I just thought it'd be an interesting point to touch on.
Totally.
In the first Baumbach series.
And I'm glad we did. All right, transitioning. I want to just go through, because I think that what I love about this movie is it is very much a bunch of scenes, right? Like it's a bunch of scenes and they're all strung together. It's like a macaroni necklace, you know? But the most beautiful macaroni necklace you ever done did see. I just want to go through the movie real quick and throw out some of your favorite Frances scenes. Because I think that the Frances Ha character it's like a comfort character for me. I just love her so much. And you talk about being seen on screen. I feel so seen with Frances. Like I feel like Frances to the utmost degree, starting with one of my favorite scenes, the dinner party scene that she's having with the Grace Gemmer character and all of the sort of affluent, super wealthy, upper white, people. She has a moment where they're talking about Paris and then she brings up a friend of hers that lives in Paris. But what she does is something that I do all the time, which is when you're talking about a subject, a word comes up, then you associate that with a story that you have in your head that really doesn't actually work in the conversation, but you bring it up and then midway through that like thing that you're talking about, you realize that nobody knows what you're talking about and that it has no relation to what you're talking about and that it was just sort of like a free association and you shouldn't have brought it up. And she does that in that scene and I felt so seen by that. I love that. That made me like bust out laughing because of how uncomfortable I was with my own behavior in conversations. So give me some of your favorite scenes.
I do like when just Frances is like running through streets and stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's a little like it's a little much, I think. And like I don't know if I would necessarily ever do that.
You've never run through the streets dancing?
The thing is, I definitely have, but like seeing it is like, oh, this is a little much.
Now you know how fucking stupid you look when you do
Got him.
We got him, boys.
We got him. But I also like
Godspeed,
just like when Frances like eats or drinks throughout the movie.
Yeah.
It's like very.
You love eating scenes.
I do love
so
eating
good.
scenes. I do. It's awesome.
Hit pause on that because this goes back even deeper. Like in theater, we always were obsessed with this. We even made the basis of one of our like in-class performances
a dinner
scene just because we love the idea of eating in performance. Because I think it's on one hand it's just kind of like fun, as a performer, but also like I think it does speak to something deeper because whenever characters are eating, it's like so raw and so visceral and so just like themselves. Like the way that Frances eats is how Frances eats, she eats in a way that reveals character. And I think that could be said about the Bong Joon-ho movies as well. So sorry, I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, but you're totally right. I mean, like also there's just like moments where she just like takes a big bite of a sandwich or something, or like in the montage sequence. I think it's my favorite shot of the movie in a weird way. But she's like at home at like a Christmas party or something, and she just downs like a full glass of wine, and I'm like, relatable, like very relatable. But yeah, I guess it's a cheat move to say this, but like my favorite Frances moments are when she's being Frances but not saying anything, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Because I want women to be silent. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm
kidding.
That.
No,
clip
it's
that.
a joke.
Cancel him.
Cancel
him.
It's a prank.
Clip it. Cancel him.
But those are the moments. Those are the moments for me that are like, damn, this is like a fully realized character. And again, it's probably a lot of Greta Gerwig in there, but it's a fully realized character that like is even the character when they're not saying they're the character, which is the best form of acting, I think.
I love that scene where she's at the like function at her old college, and she's like following the lady around with the wine bottle, and like every time the lady just takes a sip is like putting more wine in there. I just thought that was hilarious.
I think what's interesting about that is like that scene is very much Noah Baumbach. Noah Baumbach has sort of two tracks. Like he makes very personal movies about divorce and father figures, and you'll see that with like The Squid and the Whale, which is a movie I cannot wait to talk about because I think you guys might hate it. It's one of my favorites though. But that's like a very sour movie. So he makes movies like that and Marriage Story, but then he also makes these weird comedies like the Meyerowitz Stories or like Kicking and Screaming or Mr. Jealousy. Just like movies that are they're very theatery, you know, they're very like comedy of manners kind of vibes. And I love the way that scene plays out that you're talking about, Jack, because like she has to follow this woman around, and there's like three things that are happening. One, the lady that she's following around is like having like this weird tryst with this like kid that has long hair, and like that's going on as like C plot. And then there's Frances following her around, pouring wine, and then Sophie and Patch show up, and then there's that, and then it all like boils up in the same way that like a really funny theater scene would happen. Like at the very end, she just like bursts out like, "You're getting engaged." And it's like very sort of broad comedy. Like it's very silly and fun. And that's what I love about this movie too, is it's not afraid of being that, as well as all the very emotional things that it also is. It's unafraid of mixing around.
That speaks to like, just like reality and life. And that's the thing that's great.
100%. I just want to shout out a couple more scenes and then we'll move into something after this. I already mentioned the tax rebate scene. This movie has like some of my favorite scenes that have ever been put on film. Like the dinner party scene, I love the tax rebate moment. I love them in the park in the very beginning. I love so much though, probably my favorite scene in the movie, when she goes out to dinner after the tax rebate with Adam Driver. She hands the card. It comes back. It's been declined because it's a debit card. And then she has to go run all the way to an ATM. Mm-hmm. Then she debates whether or not she can afford the surcharge of $3. Ultimately says yes, and then runs back, trips, gets back, and then she's like bleeding at the table. I just love that whole sequence. I think that is, again, sort of like this very weird, broad, funny moment. And everything about it just works for me.
Yeah, that was very fun. That was a very fun moment. I enjoyed that sequence there too.
Again, it's a nice slice of life piece, and if you haven't checked it out, I feel like this whole discussion usually like we have like spoiler discussions, but like this was a spoiler discussion, but like you can still just watch the movie, because I don't think this movie is so much about like what happens in it as in just like the experience of watching it and the journey of like going through it. But yeah, we'd all I think we'd all like recommend watching Frances Ha at least once. But yeah, I think that's my final thoughts.
Yeah, it didn't do a whole lot for me the first time watching it. I think I got to watch it again. Don't know when that'll be. That might be in 2 years or something, whenever I get around to it. Might be never, because that's just how these things go sometimes. But, you know, it wasn't bad. It was pretty solid. I give it 3 out of 5.
Hell yeah. With that being said, it's time for the Noah Baumbach rankings. Woo-hoo! Here we go.
Wow.
Check.
All right. It's time for the Noah Baumbach rankings. Got a new picture. It's not Bong sipping whatever he was sipping in a long chair. It's something else.
Or it could be Noah Baumbach sipping at if we just Photoshop the new director onto it every time. That
or
would
it
be
could
funny.
be Bong sipping it still.
That's true. It still could be. That'd be really funny.
Be Bong.
Today is the beginning of the Noah Baumbach series, so we have one film to add to the Noah Baumbach rankings. Jack, I'm going to start with you. Where do you place Frances Ha in the Baumbach rankings?
I spent a lot of time and energy thinking about this, but I think at the number 1 spot, I'm going Frances Ha.
Okay, fantastic. Tyler, where are you going to rank Frances Ha in the Noah Baumbach rankings?
Okay. So on the very bottom right now is Okja.
Still at the bottom. Okay. Really didn't work for us.
And then number one, and okay, fucking get Okja out of there.
All right.
In last place, I think is going to be Frances Ha, and then in first place is going to be Frances Ha.
Okay.
And Daniel?
Can I make a revision to mine?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think instead of having Frances Ha at number 1, I want to put it at number 1, actually.
Okay, Dan, you got to fix that.
So I got Frances Ha at number 1 instead of having number 1 being Frances Ha.
Dan?
You know, I already spoiled it a little bit. This is one of my favorite movies, but I'm going to go ahead and put Frances Ha at number 1. And, you know, it's going to be pretty tough to dethrone. It's going to be pretty tough to dethrone.
Oh, shit.
Although, on a serious note, coming out of the rankings,
we all have the same ranking.
We do all have the same ranking. So far, we're all even.
Wow.
That means the Nothing Notable rankings. Frances Ha at number 1.
Also, this is the first time since the host that we all have had the same rankings.
That's true. But on a serious note, I do think, you know, what I'm really interested in is, because I knew that Parasite was going to be our number 1. I knew it was going to be all of our favorite movies.
Yeah.
I knew that Mother and Memories of Murder were going to be up there as well. And with Baumbach, there are some movies that are so out there, so acidic, so sour, that they might turn you off completely. And they might end up at the bottom of your rankings, and they're going to be like near the top of mine. He makes very strange movies, and he's a very odd director, very interesting director. So I think that the rankings for this one are going to be, I think that they're going to be very skewed. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of sameness. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about him. Yeah.
I mean, it's like how Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou is one of my favorite Wes Anderson movies, and like a lot of people don't like that movie.
That's a great movie. We might talk about Wes Anderson one day.
I mean, Baumbach and Wes Anderson are kind of adjacent because they have worked together on scripts before. So
that's oh my God. Okay, well, I'll save that for when we do like a real comedy of Baumbach's, because that is a really important thing, because I do think that they are very similar filmmakers, but the reason I like Baumbach more than Wes Anderson is for a couple of reasons that we'll talk about at another time.
Yeah. I think I probably we'll do this real fast.
Yeah, please.
You can cut this out too, but I just want to say this. I think I do probably like some Wes Anderson movies more, but I think overall I've liked Baumbach more consistently, because sometimes I really love Wes Anderson movies and other times I hate them. Like I hate Isle of Dogs.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
And I'll just say that right now.
Okay, well that concludes our conversation about Frances Ha. There's so much that I mean I could do like 45 hours on Frances Ha, because I love this movie. It's on my short list for favorite movies of all time. It's just something that really like gets me, and I really connect with in a strong way. Hopefully you have watched it. If you haven't, go check it out. It's available on the Criterion Collection. Where did you guys watch it?
On Hulu or Amazon.
It's on Showtime.
I had to get a 7-day Showtime trial.
Okay. Yeah, not quite as available as you'd like it to be. But do seek it out. Maybe there's a free version of it on YouTube. I don't know. It's a short movie. You could get away with it. But hopefully you watched it. Hopefully you like it. Next time, we're going to talk about Kicking and Screaming, Noah Baumbach's first film.
Hell yeah.
This movie, Frances Ha, is very much about an artist in a sort of struggling moment of their life, a transitional period of their life. Kicking and Screaming, Noah Baumbach's first movie, is about people also in a transitional period in their life, coming out of college. It's that first year when you don't know where you're going with your life. And I think that movie might hit really hard for us right now, because we're in that point as well.
Yeah. And again, it's the 1995 version, not to be confused with Kicking and Screaming, the 2005 Will Ferrell comedy.
Thank you for that. Yes, because there's a lot of SEO crossover there. There's some issues there. Anyway, so look forward to that. Do watch that and watch along with us as we go through the series. I really love Noah Baumbach. I'm really excited to do this series. And as always, if you have suggestions for other filmmakers, let us know, because we are compiling a list, and we're gonna try to get through a bunch of filmmakers as we do this podcast. So please recommend foreign directors, American directors, anybody. And then we'll continue to talk about our favorite filmmakers and some of our favorite films. Thank you so much for listening. I've been Daniel.
I've been Jack.
And I've been Tyler.
And I was going to try to end with like a Francis Ha-ism, but I couldn't think of one, so I'll just start dancing.
We're all running across the street right now.